The chains bite into her wrists. The street smells of sweat, wine, and fear. 50,000 eyes follow as soldiers drag a naked woman through the heart of Rome. She isn't being executed. Not yet. This is the prelude. Each stop along the route is chosen to break her. The temple where she prayed, the market where she sold bread, the doorway where her mother stands silent. They call it justice. They call it purification. But it's a show, built by law, blessed by priests, and paid for with taxes. Before she meets the beasts, Rome will strip her of everything that made her human. If you value the record, subscribe. Because when the ledger closes, the bones still speak. The year is 72 CE. Emperor Vespasian reigns. The Colosseum is still under construction, but Rome doesn't wait for walls to perfect cruelty. The condemned are paraded through the streets, flesh before stone. This woman's crime could be anything: adultery, treason, rejecting the advances of a senator's son. It doesn't matter. What matters is what she represents: defiance. As she's pulled past the forum, vendors cheer. Children stand on crates to see her body. Men throw rotten vegetables. Women watch quietly, tightening their shawls, pretending not to see themselves in her. The guards stop at each intersection for the crowd to jeer. They break her fingers when she tries to cover her chest. They force her to bow outside temples where she once prayed, saying she's defiled the gods. This is not execution, it's instruction. The parade is a message that purity belongs to the state, not to the self. Rome calls these displays education. Children are told to watch so they'll understand consequence. Fathers nod solemnly. Mothers whisper. This is what happens when a woman forgets her place. But the truth is simpler. Fear is contagious, and Rome knew how to weaponize it. The entire city participates, willingly or not. Bakers offer free bread to soldiers. Tavern owners open their doors. The Senate decrees the route. Even priests stand ready to sprinkle blessed water over blood-stained stones. Every citizen's silence becomes part of the performance. By the end of the parade, no one remembers what she did, only that she deserved it. That is the brilliance of the ritual. It cleanses the spectators as much as it condemns the victim. Rome doesn't call this cruelty, it calls it law. The decree is written clearly: damnatio ad bestias, condemnation to the beasts. But the beasts are many. The soldiers who drag her, the priests who bless the route, the senators who sign the warrant. Every cog turns smoothly in this machinery of virtue. No one is guilty, because everyone is following procedure. And that's what makes it terrifying: the bureaucracy of pain. To Rome, law was theatre. The courtroom decided the script. The city performed it. The condemned woman wasn't punished for sin. She was transformed into a living warning, a public sacrifice to the empire's idea of order. The audience cheers not out of hatred, but relief. As long as someone else is naked, someone else is bleeding, they believe the gods will spare them. When she finally reaches the arena gates, she collapses. The soldiers lift her by the hair. Inside, the crowd waits, drunk on anticipation. But before she meets the animals, Rome pauses. The priests chant. The law is read aloud. word by word, to sanctify what's about to happen. The ceremony is complete. Rome has achieved the perfect illusion, violence disguised as virtue. So here's the question that haunts every empire that calls itself civilized. How did the empire of law transform sexual violence into a tool of governance and call it sacred? Because if justice can be performed like theatre, if purity can be enforced through terror, then maybe the line between religion, law, and cruelty never existed at all. In the next act, we'll go deeper into the ledgers, into the temples, and into the very economics of pain, to see how Rome industrialized humiliation into policy. Before she ever reaches the arena, the city has already prepared her death as an event. Each district receives orders days in advance. Sweep the streets, hang banners, collect taxes for the spectacle. The bakeries will open early, the taverns will serve watered wine, and vendors will sell roasted nuts to the spectators. Even the parade route is engineered. Roman engineers, the same men who built aqueducts, map the exact length of the march so the condemned will collapse at the arena gates not a moment sooner. Behind her walk two scribes, recording the reactions of the crowd. Every curse shouted, every stone thrown, every silence noted. The data will be archived. Rome doesn't only kill, it collects. In this empire, humiliation is infrastructure. There's a supply chain for suffering. The blacksmith who forged the chains, the cloth merchant who sold the red dye for the banners, the priest who blesses the execution site for a fee. Every layer of society earns something from her destruction. Pain has profit. Terror has logistics. Rome was never satisfied with punishment alone. It needed moral justification. So the Senate and the temples learned to work together, a partnership between scripture and statute. The Lex Julia defined adultery as a crime not against a husband, but against the state itself. That single legal phrase gave Rome the right to control the female body as a national asset. To purify the empire, her body had to be destroyed publicly, under divine supervision. Priests performed blessings before each execution, invoking Vesta, goddess of purity. They claimed each death restored balance between heaven and empire. But look closer. These were not religious rites. They were political theatre, moral camouflage for bureaucratic cruelty. At the Forum, marble inscriptions declared, "Let impurity be burned away," and no one noticed the irony. That impurity was defined by the same men who profited from the punishment. This is how law becomes faith, and how faith becomes weaponized obedience. When the gates open, 50,000 citizens pour into the arena. Families bring blankets. Merchants rent shade tents. Senators sit in marble seats above them all. The condemned women are forced to reenact myths, Europa, Leda, Pasiphae, stories where gods violated mortals. But in Rome's version, there are no gods, only trained animals and condemned flesh. Bulls and horses are starved for days, then unleashed while the crowd cheers as if watching theatre. This is not random depravity, it is curriculum. Children are told, this is how the empire punishes defiance. Women learn to remain silent. Men learn to obey orders. And everyone learns the same lesson. Rome's power is not just to kill, but to humiliate. The executioners are chosen not for brutality, but for precision. They pause at specific intervals, long enough for the crowd to savor fear, short enough to avoid boredom. The Empire has perfected timing, choreography, spectacle. Even death follows a schedule. At the end, ashes are swept away by slaves who must not look up. By sunset, the arena returns to order. Tomorrow, another woman will take her place. The Empire runs on repetition. If you think this was chaos, you underestimate Rome. Every horror was designed. Emperor Caligula treated executions like rehearsals. He consulted architects, engineers, and animal trainers to invent new ways of breaking the human body. Beneath his palace, archaeologists have found subterranean chambers, private arenas where he tested spectacles before unleashing them on the public. He called it innovation in discipline. Nero went further. He performed in the arena himself, dressed as a gladiator, assaulting prisoners while the Senate watched. When he finished, he called it divine justice, carried out by a living god. Under Domitian, punishment became acoustics. He ordered engineers to build underground chambers that amplified the screams of buried Vestal virgins so the entire city could hear them echo through the marble streets. He called it the voice of purity. These were not madmen in isolation. They were administrators of fear. Their cruelty followed budget lines, timetables, and temple decrees. Every death was planned, measured, and accounted for. Rome turned horror into policy, and policy into ritual. The woman's body, now lifeless, is dragged across the sand. The crowd roars one last time, then disperses calmly to taverns and baths. By nightfall, the city smells again of bread and incense. The scribes record the event's final details: number of spectators, volume of offerings, total cost. The page closes. The empire continues. And yet, somewhere beneath the noise, a question lingers like the stench of blood. If everyone saw it, if the priests blessed it, the senators approved it, and the crowd cheered for it, then who exactly was guilty? Rome called this justice. But what do you call a system where every citizen becomes part of the punishment? The answer will come in the final act. Buried deep beneath the city, in the tombs of women the empire feared more than rebellion itself, the Vestal virgins. Their fate will reveal how Rome's obsession with purity consumed its own soul. Beneath the marble floor of the Forum lies a sealed chamber, narrow, airless, lined with shards of pottery. This is where the empire buried its purity alive. The Vestal virgins were Rome's holiest women, 6 priestesses chosen as children, sworn to guard the eternal flame that symbolized the empire's soul. Their bodies belonged to the goddess Vesta, their purity to the state. For 3 decades, they lived in silence and ritual, untouched by men, revered by law. But the same law that raised them would one day devour them. If a Vestal broke her vow of chastity, even by rumor, she could not be executed. Spilling her blood would pollute the city. So the priests found a loophole. They would not spill her blood. They would bury her alive. At dawn, the accused Vestal was stripped of her white robes and clothed in funeral rags. The Senate gathered to witness. No defense was allowed, no verdict read. The verdict was the silence. As she trembled, priests prayed over her body as if it were already a corpse. Then began the procession, slow, ceremonial, through the same streets where once she had been honored. Children followed, vendors whispered. The people lowered their eyes, pretending not to see. Every step was a rehearsal of her own burial. At the edge of the city, the earth waited, a pit large enough for one body, furnished with a lamp, a little water, and a loaf of bread, enough to sustain life, not enough to save it. When she descended, the priests turned away. They sealed the entrance with a slab of stone. Above, hymns were sung. Below, the air grew thin. Her screams rose through the soil. The engineers had designed the chamber so the sound would echo upward, vibrating through the marble of the forum. Rome called it divine justice, the voice of purity crying to heaven. But it was only Rome listening to itself, mistaking the echo of its cruelty for the approval of gods. Pliny recorded one Vestal, who lived for 18 days in the dark, 18 days without light, 18 days hearing her own breath rebound against stone. When they reopened the pit, the lamp still burned. The priests declared it a miracle, proof that the gods had accepted her soul. Then they executed her anyway, for surviving divine judgment. This was no longer punishment. It was self-consumption. The empire had turned its violence inward, feeding on the very symbols that once sanctified it. The eternal flame of Vesta, once tended by pure hands, became a justification for torture. The law that promised order now demanded ritual suffering to maintain its illusion. Purity became pathology, faith became theatre, and cruelty became Rome's only constant truth. By the 4th century, the eternal flame was extinguished. The temple was abandoned, the Vestals scattered, but the idea that pain could purify survived long after the gods had fallen silent. 2,000 years later, the arenas are ruins, but the spectacle never ended. It simply changed form. We no longer gather under marble arches. We gather behind screens. We no longer throw stones. We post, we share, we laugh. Public humiliation has become invisible architecture, designed, monetized, and ritualized once again. Crowds chant not in forums, but in comment sections. Executions happen not by blade, but by algorithm. Each viral outrage feels righteous, moral, cleansing, but the mechanism is ancient. Find impurity, expose it, destroy it, together. We call it accountability. Rome called it justice. The difference is smaller than we like to believe. The empire of law survived its own collapse because it learned how to adapt its cruelty. Today, it hides in new temples, corporations, institutions, digital platforms. The tools are different. The instinct is the same. And every time a crowd demands punishment in the name of virtue, every time humiliation is sold as entertainment, the ancient ritual begins again. Beneath the forum, the bones of the Vestals still lie sealed in darkness. Archaeologists are forbidden to disturb them, officially out of reverence, unofficially out of fear. Because if those bodies were unearthed, the myth of purity might crumble with them. Above ground, tourists walk where screams once rose. Children eat ice cream where ashes once fell. And history, ever obedient, pretends not to remember. But the stones remember. They always do. Every law leaves an echo. Every empire leaves a chamber it refuses to open. Rome's greatest monument was not the Colosseum. It was the system that made cruelty feel sacred. And that system, the politics of purity, the economics of shame, the pleasure of watching others fall, still stands. When the ledger closes, the bones still speak, and their voice sounds disturbingly familiar